Liam felt the silence in his small apartment press down on him, heavy and suffocating like a damp blanket. It had been a year since Clara left, but her ghost lingered in the empty spaces, a constant mocking reminder of what he had lost, or rather, what had been so cruelly taken from him. He sat at his small kitchen table, a single envelope in front of him. It was a cheap, plain thing, the kind you bought in a pack of 50. Inside was a money order for $500 and a simple, handwritten note. The note was for Eleanor, his former mother-in-law. It was the 12th such envelope he had prepared since the divorce. Every month, without fail, he sent it. It was a promise, one he had made to his own mother on her deathbed, a promise to always look after the woman who had never shown him a shred of kindness. Clara had called it pathetic. During one of their final screaming arguments, she had thrown the word at him like a stone. "You're still going to send money to my mother? Even after this? You're just a pathetic, sentimental fool, Liam. That's why you'll never amount to anything." Her words had cut deep, but they hadn't broken his resolve. A promise was a promise, especially one made to the person who had given him everything. So he worked his fingers to the bone at the carpentry shop, taking on extra jobs, sanding and staining until his muscles ached, just to make sure he had that extra $500 every month. He sealed the envelope, the bitter taste of memory in his mouth. He remembered the last family dinner, the night Clara had chosen to end their marriage. It wasn't a quiet, respectful separation. It was a public execution. She had waited until her father had finished his toast to her and her new business partner, a slick, smiling man named Marcus, whose suit probably cost more than Liam's car. The clinking of crystal glasses had just subsided when Clara stood up, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. "I have an announcement," she had declared, her voice cutting through the atmosphere like a blade. "Liam and I are separating. I've realized I deserve more than a life of sawdust and splinters. I need a man who can provide, a man with ambition, a man like Marcus." The silence that followed was devastating. Liam felt 100 pairs of eyes on him, a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. Eleanor, his mother-in-law, had let out a theatrical sigh of relief. "Thank goodness," she had whispered, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "I was so worried she'd be stuck with him forever." Marcus had put a possessive arm around Clara, pulling her close. He looked at Liam with undisguised contempt. "Don't worry, old sport," he'd said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I'll take good care of her. We'll send you a postcard from Monaco." Liam had just sat there, frozen. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. All he could do was watch as the life he had built shattered into a million pieces around him. He had stumbled out of that house, the sound of laughter following him into the cold night air. That was his last memory of them as a family. Humiliation. Cruelty. The cold, hard reality that he was not, and had never been, good enough for them. He picked up the sealed envelope and his worn jacket. The post office was a few blocks away. As he walked, the chilly autumn wind whipped at his face, but he barely felt it. The cold inside him was far worse. He did this for his mother. He repeated the words to himself like a mantra. She had been friends with Eleanor, a friendship Liam never understood. His mother was warm, kind, and generous. Eleanor was a woman who measured worth in dollars and social status. "Promise me, Liam," his mother had said, her voice a fragile whisper in her final days. "Promise me you'll always look out for Eleanor. She puts on a brave face, but she's fragile underneath it all." Liam had never seen that fragility. He had only ever seen judgment and scorn. But he had promised, and he would keep that promise no matter how much it hurt. He dropped the envelope into the mailbox, the metal slot clanging shut with a note of finality. Another month, another payment. Another piece of himself sent to a woman who despised him for the sake of a woman who loved him. It felt like a penance, a strange, unending punishment for a crime he didn't commit. Back in his apartment, he sorted through the day's mail. Bills, junk mail, and another official-looking envelope from a law firm he didn't recognize. Sterling, Croft, and Gable. It was the third one they had sent. He'd thrown the other two away, assuming it was some kind of solicitation. This time, however, something made him pause. The paper was thick, expensive, the address was embossed. Curiosity, faint but persistent, pricked at him. He slit it open with his thumb. The letter was brief and formal. It was an urgent and final request for him to schedule a meeting regarding the estate of a woman named Annalise Dubois. The name meant nothing to him. He tossed the letter onto the pile of bills, dismissing it. It had to be a mistake. Life settled into a grim routine. Work, eat, sleep, and send the money. He sometimes saw pictures of Clara and Marcus on social media, posted by her cousins. They were always on a yacht, or at a gala, or standing in front of some exotic landmark. They looked happy, successful. They looked like they had forgotten he ever existed. Each photo was a fresh stab of pain. It wasn't just that she had left him, it was that she was so clearly thriving without him while he was stuck in this quiet, grey existence. He felt like a ghost haunting the edges of a life he was no longer a part of. One Saturday, his phone rang. It was an unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something compelled him to answer. "Is this Mr. Liam Foster?" a crisp, professional voice asked. "Yes, this is he," Liam replied, wiping sawdust from his hands onto his jeans. "This is Arthur Gable from Sterling, Croft and Gable. We have been trying to reach you for several months regarding a matter of extreme importance." Liam frowned. "I think you have the wrong person. I don't know any Annalise Dubois." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Mr. Foster?" the lawyer said, his voice now laced with a steely seriousness. "Annalise Dubois knew your mother, Evelyn Foster. This is not a mistake. If you do not meet with us, you will be forfeiting an inheritance of considerable, and I must stress, life-altering significance. Can you be at our offices on Monday at 10 in the morning? Inheritance? Life-altering?" The words seemed to belong to another language, another world. It made no sense. His mother had left him the small house he'd had to sell to cover her medical bills and nothing else. They had been simple people. I suppose I can," Liam stammered, his mind reeling. "Excellent. We are on the 48th floor of the downtown financial tower. We will validate your parking." The line went dead. Liam stood in his workshop, the scent of cedar and pine filling his lungs, the phone still pressed to his ear. The world felt tilted, off balance. Annalise Dubois. He searched his memory, digging through faded images of his mother's friends. And then a flicker. A woman who came to visit sometimes. She was quiet, always dressed in simple, elegant clothes that seemed out of place in their modest home. She had kind eyes, but a sad smile. His mother had called her Annie. She was the one who had stopped visiting a few years before his mother passed. He'd assumed they had simply lost touch. The weekend passed in a blur of confusion and nervous energy. Could it be real? Or was it some elaborate scam? He almost didn't go. It felt safer to stay in his world of wood and varnish, a world he understood. But the lawyer's urgent tone echoed in his mind. On Monday morning he put on his only suit, the one he had worn to his wedding and his mother's funeral. It felt tight in the shoulders now, a relic of a different version of himself. He drove his old, rattling pickup truck into the gleaming underground garage of the financial tower, feeling entirely out of place among the sleek European cars. The offices of Sterling, Croft, and Gable were intimidating, all glass, steel, and hushed whispers. A receptionist with a polished smile directed him to a corner office with a breathtaking view of the city. Arthur Gable was an older man with sharp, intelligent eyes and a perfectly tailored suit. He stood and shook Liam's hand firmly. "Mr. Foster, thank you for coming. Please, sit." Liam sat on the edge of a leather chair that probably cost more than his monthly rent. He felt like a child in the principal's office. Mr. Gable sat opposite him, folding his hands on a vast mahogany desk. "Let me be direct," he began. "Annalise Dubois was one of our firm's oldest and most valued clients. She was also, by any measure, one of the wealthiest women in the country. She passed away 18 months ago." Liam's mind struggled to connect the quiet, sad woman he vaguely remembered with this description. "Annalise had no living relatives," the lawyer continued. "She spent the last decade of her life carefully planning the dispersal of her estate. She was a very private person, and she valued character above all else. She was very fond of your mother, Evelyn." Mr. Gable slid a thick, leather-bound document across the desk. "This is a copy of her final will and testament. To put it simply, Mr. Foster, with the exception of a few charitable donations, she left everything to you." Liam stared at him blankly. "Everything? What does that mean?" The lawyer leaned back, a faint smile on his face. "It means you are the sole heir to the Dubois fortune. This includes a portfolio of stocks, bonds, real estate holdings, private equity firms, and several dozen global corporations. The total value after taxes and disbursements is approximately $91 billion. The number hung in the air, nonsensical and absurd, 91 billion. It wasn't a sum of money. It was a concept, an astronomical figure that his brain refused to process. He felt a wave of dizziness wash over him. "There must be a mistake," Liam whispered, his voice hoarse. "She barely knew me." "She knew your mother," Mr. Gable corrected gently. "And through her she knew you. She admired your dedication to your mother during her illness. She saw you as a young man of integrity and quiet strength. She believed you would not be corrupted by this." He pointed to a specific clause in the will. There were conditions. The inheritance was to be held in a blind trust for 18 months following her death. We, the executors, were to observe you without making contact. There was also a specific, rather unusual stipulation. Mr. Gable cleared his throat. "It was Annalise's wish, discussed at length with your mother, that you continue to provide a monthly stipend of $500 to Eleanor Vance, your former mother-in-law, for a period of 1 year after your divorce from her daughter, should such a divorce occur." Liam's blood ran cold. The payments, the promise. It wasn't just his mother's wish, it was a test. "The funds for that stipend were disbursed from the trust's interest," the lawyer explained. "It was a test of character, Mr. Foster, a test to see if you would honor a promise even when it was painful and thankless. You passed. Had you stopped the payments, the bulk of the fortune would have been redirected to charities." Liam felt the air leave his lungs. For a year, he had been scraping by, feeling like a fool, while every payment he sent was a key turning a lock on a vast, unimaginable treasure. The cruelty he had endured, the humiliation, his quiet suffering, it had all been an unwitting audition. He thought of Clara's mocking words. "You're just a pathetic, sentimental fool." He thought of Eleanor's condescending sneer. He thought of Marcus's smug, dismissive laugh. A strange feeling began to bloom in his chest. It started as a low hum and grew into a roaring fire. It wasn't just shock or disbelief anymore. It was something else. It was a cold, clarifying rage. For years they had treated him like dirt. They had judged him by the contents of his wallet and found him wanting. They had built their entire world on the idea that wealth equaled worth and that he had none. And all along this power had been sitting in silence, waiting for him. "The trust is now fully under your control," Mr. Gable said, bringing him back to the present. "We have prepared all the necessary documents for you to sign. You are, for all intents and purposes, the chairman of a global financial empire." Liam looked down at his hands, calloused and scarred from years of hard labor. He had built things his whole life: cabinets, tables, chairs, solid, honest things made of wood. Now he had been given the power to build or to demolish on a scale he could barely comprehend. He picked up the pen. It felt heavy in his hand, heavier than any hammer or saw. He thought of Clara's face, twisted with scorn. He thought of the laughter that had followed him out the door. A slow, cold smile spread across his face. It was a smile Clara had never seen. It wasn't the smile of the pathetic, sentimental fool she had discarded. It was the smile of a man who was about to become her worst nightmare. "Where do I sign?" he asked, his voice steady and clear. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings. Liam was introduced to financial advisors, asset managers, and corporate lawyers. He learned about shell corporations, holding companies, and investment vehicles with names so complex they sounded like a foreign language. He was a quick study, his practical mind grasping the complex systems with surprising ease. The world of high finance, he discovered, was not so different from carpentry. It was all about structure, leverage, and knowing where to apply pressure. During one of these meetings, a name on a spreadsheet caught his eye: Vanguard Capital Partners. It was listed as a mid-level private equity firm wholly owned by the Dubois Primary Holding Company. "What can you tell me about this one?" Liam asked Arthur Gable, who had become his constant guide and confidant. Mr. Gable adjusted his glasses and peered at the file. "Vanguard, aggressive, high risk, high reward. They specialize in leveraged buyouts and providing bridge financing to startups with, let's call it, questionable collateral." Annalise was never fond of their methods, but it was consistently profitable. Liam felt a jolt of intuition, a cold premonition that made the hairs on his arm stand up. "Can you pull up their active loan portfolio? I want to see who they're lending to." A few keystrokes later, a list of names and figures filled the screen. Liam scanned it, his heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. And then he saw it. Borrower: Sterling Enterprises, LLC. Principal: Marcus Sterling. Loan amount: $25 million with an additional $15 million in a revolving line of credit. Liam stared at the name, a feeling of profound biblical irony washing over him. Marcus, the man who had stolen his wife and mocked his poverty, the man whose entire empire of fancy suits and sports cars was built on a foundation of debt, and the owner of that debt was him. "It appears," Mr. Gable said, a note of dawning comprehension in his voice, "that your ex-wife's new partner is one of your tenants." Liam leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking like an old church door. The universe didn't just have a sense of humor, it had a taste for vicious, poetic justice. Marcus wasn't just in his debt. His entire extravagant lifestyle, the very thing Clara had left him for, was being financed by the fortune of the pathetic fool she had so gleefully discarded. He thought about the pictures online. The yacht was probably leased. The mansion was almost certainly mortgaged to the hilt. The parties, the clothes, the champagne, it was all a performance, a stage play funded by his money. "Arthur," Liam said, his voice dangerously quiet, I want to know everything about Marcus Sterling. I want to see every transaction, every contract, every piece of collateral he put up. I want to know if he's ever missed a payment, ever bent a rule, ever violated a single covenant of his loan agreement. Mr. Gable's expression was grimly professional, but Liam could see a flicker of something else in his eyes, a lawyer's appreciation for a truly magnificent legal weapon. I'll have our top forensic accounting team on it immediately. If there's a crack in his armor, we will find it. Meanwhile, Clara and Marcus remained blissfully unaware, living their gilded life. They had recently moved into a sprawling modern mansion in the most exclusive part of the city. Their housewarming party was the talk of the town, a lavish affair with a live band, catered food, and an endless river of champagne. Clara had never been happier. She moved through the crowd, her arm linked with Marcus's, soaking in the envy and admiration of her guests. This was the life she was meant for. She had escaped the dreary, sawdust-filled existence with Liam and ascended to her rightful place in society. Her mother, Eleanor, was preening, telling anyone who would listen about her wonderful, successful new son-in-law. "Marcus is a true visionary," she would say. "Not like that last one, a simple carpenter. Can you imagine?" One evening, as Clara was getting ready for another charity gala, she brought up a minor annoyance. "It's so strange. My mother is still getting that pitiful little check from Liam every month. It's embarrassing." Marcus, adjusting his diamond cufflinks in the mirror, chuckled. "Let the poor sap send it. It probably makes him feel like he still has some connection to you. It's sad, really. Some people just can't let go." "I suppose," Clara said, a cruel smile touching her lips. "I just wish he'd disappear. Every time Mom mentions it, it's like this grubby little reminder of where I came from." "Don't worry, my love," Marcus said, kissing her bare shoulder. "Soon we'll be so far above him he won't even be a memory." He felt invincible. His latest deal was about to close, and his credit line with Vanguard Capital was secure. Life was perfect. Back in the sterile confines of the law office, the forensic accountants delivered their report. It was better, or rather worse, than Liam could have ever hoped for. "Mr. Sterling is a house of cards," the lead accountant, a woman with piercing eyes named Ms. Davies, explained. "He's leveraged to an obscene degree. He uses funds from his revolving credit line to make the interest payments on his primary loan. It's a classic Ponzi scheme, essentially. He's robbing Peter to pay Paul." She pointed to a highlighted section. "And here is the nail in the coffin. The collateral he listed for the primary loan includes assets that were already pledged to another lender, and in 2 cases, assets that don't actually exist. He claimed ownership of 2 commercial properties that are, in fact, owned by a municipal authority." Arthur Gable's eyebrows shot up. "That's not just a breach of covenant, that's felony bank fraud." Liam felt a cold, satisfying calm settle over him. The weapon was not just loaded, it was aimed directly at the heart of Marcus's fragile empire. "So what are my options?" Liam asked. "Your options are extensive," Mr. Gable replied, his voice resonating with legal authority. "As the sole owner of Vanguard Capital, you can call in the loan immediately, citing fraudulent misrepresentation and breach of contract. All his assets will be frozen pending a full audit. His credit will be destroyed. It would trigger a cascade of defaults with his other lenders. He would be ruined, utterly and completely, within 48 hours. The path was clear. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. Marcus was a fraud. Clara had attached herself to a lie. They had built their world on arrogance and deceit. He was simply going to hold up a mirror and force them to see the truth. "I want to do more than that," Liam said slowly, an idea forming in his mind. I don't just want to ruin him. I want them to know it was me. He leaned forward, outlining his plan. He wanted it to be surgical. He wanted them to feel confusion first, then panic, then terror. He wanted them to exhaust every option, to call every friend, to humiliate themselves by begging for help from people who would turn their backs on them. Only then, at their absolute lowest point, when they had nothing left, would he reveal his hand. We'll start on Monday, Liam said, his voice devoid of emotion. Initiate the loan recall, freeze his accounts, but do it anonymously. Vanguard Capital will simply state it's a portfolio management decision. No further explanation. Mr. Gable nodded, a glint of admiration in his eye. Consider it done? The first domino was about to fall. Liam felt no glee, no triumphant joy. He felt only a profound sense of rightness, like a craftsman setting a perfectly cut joint into place. The structure of their downfall was being built, and he would ensure it was solid, inescapable, and complete. The call came on a Monday morning. Marcus was on his private jet, flying back from a weekend in the Caribbean with Clara when his CFO patched through, his voice tight with panic. Marcus, we have a problem, a big one. Vanguard Capital just called in our entire loan. They're citing covenant violations and freezing the credit line. They want the full $25 million by Friday. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. What? That's impossible. They can't do that. Did they say why? No, they were completely stonewalling. Just said it was a non-negotiable directive from their new ownership. Marcus, our accounts are already frozen. Payroll is on Thursday. We're finished if we can't fix this. Marcus ended the call, his hand trembling. He looked over at Clara, who was sipping champagne and flipping through a fashion magazine, completely oblivious. He forced a smile. Just a minor business headache, darling. Nothing to worry about. But it was something to worry about. For the next 3 days, Marcus lived in a state of escalating terror. He called his contacts at Vanguard, but the people he knew were suddenly unavailable or claimed to have no information. He tried to secure a loan from other banks, but the news of Vanguard's recall had spread through the financial community like a virus. No one would touch him. He grew more and more desperate. He and Clara had a vicious argument when he told her they had to cancel their upcoming trip to Paris. Cancel it? Why? She had shrieked, her face a mask of indignation. I've already bought my outfits. Marcus, what is going on? It's a temporary cash flow issue, he lied, sweat beading on his forehead. A competitor is trying to squeeze me. It will be sorted out in a week. But it wasn't sorted out. By Friday, the first wave of repossessions began. The leased jet was recalled, then the exotic cars. The credit cards were declined one by one. The shame was unbearable. Clara watched in horror as a tow truck hauled away her gleaming white convertible. What is happening? She screamed at Marcus, her voice cracking with hysteria. You told me everything was fine. I'm working on it, he yelled back, his composure completely gone. He was a cornered animal, lashing out in fear. Liam watched it all from a distance. Mr. Gable's team provided him with daily updates. He saw the panicked emails, the transcripts of desperate phone calls, the reports of declined transactions. He felt a grim satisfaction, like watching a faulty structure collapse under its own weight. The next blow was the eviction notice. The mansion, mortgaged with Vanguard Capital as the hidden lien holder, was being foreclosed upon. They were given 30 days to vacate. The news was leaked to the society pages, and suddenly Clara and Marcus were pariahs. The friends who had flocked to their parties no longer answered their calls. The invitations stopped coming. Their world had not just crumbled, it had evaporated. It was Eleanor who suggested the unthinkable. She sat with Clara in the half-empty mansion surrounded by packing boxes. Marcus was locked in his office, trying to stave off bankruptcy. "There's only one person I can think of who might help," Eleanor said, her voice thin and reedy. Clara looked at her, confused. "Who? Everyone has abandoned us." "Liam," her mother whispered, the name tasting like ash in her mouth. "He's always had a soft spot for you. And he's a sentimental fool. He's still sending me that money every month, even now. He must still care." Clara's first reaction was disgust. "Go crawling back to Liam, the carpenter? Never! I would rather live on the street." "We are about to live on the street," Eleanor snapped, her own fear making her cruel. "Your pride is what got us into this mess. You had a good, steady man, and you threw him away for this fraud. Now swallow that stupid pride and go ask him for help. He's our only hope." The thought was repulsive, a humiliation beyond anything she had ever imagined. But as the days passed and their situation grew more desperate, the idea began to seem less like a choice and more like a necessity. Finally, with less than a week before they were to be thrown out of the house, Clara broke. She found Liam's address online. It was a small, unassuming house in a working-class neighborhood, the one he had bought after selling his mother's place. She put on her most expensive remaining dress, a desperate attempt to project an image of success that no longer existed. She and Eleanor drove there in Eleanor's modest sedan, the last car they had between them. Liam was in his workshop in the garage, the big doors wide open. He was planing a piece of dark walnut wood, the shavings curling at his feet. He was wearing a simple t-shirt and jeans, covered in a fine layer of sawdust. He looked exactly the same. Solid, calm, real. He looked up as they approached, his expression unreadable. He turned off the planer, and the sudden silence was deafening. "Liam," Clara began, her voice trembling slightly. She had rehearsed a speech, but now, standing before him, the words felt hollow and false. Eleanor pushed past her. "Liam, we need your help," she said, forgoing any pretense. "We're in terrible trouble. Marcus, his business collapsed. We've lost everything. We're about to be homeless." Liam wiped his hands on a rag, his movements slow and deliberate. He looked from Eleanor's desperate face to Clara's strained, proud one. He said nothing. "We need to borrow some money," Clara finally managed to say, the words feeling like poison on her tongue. "Just enough to get back on our feet. A loan. We'll pay you back, with interest." Liam leaned against his workbench, crossing his arms over his chest. He let the silence stretch out, watching them squirm. He saw the desperation in their eyes, the raw terror beneath the surface. This was the moment he had been waiting for. "Why would I help you?" he asked, his voice low and even. It held no anger, no pity. It was as cold and hard as polished stone. "Because you're a good person," Clara said, trying to force a seductive smile that looked more like a grimace. "You loved me once. You still send my mother money. I know you're not cruel." Liam let out a short, humorless laugh. "You know nothing about me, Clara. You never did. You looked at me and saw a carpenter, a simple man. You saw sawdust and splinters and thought that was all there was." He took a step towards them, and for the first time they saw the change in him. It was in his eyes. The quiet, gentle man they had known was gone. In his place was someone with the unnerving stillness of absolute power. "You left me for a richer man," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You stood up in front of your family and friends and you humiliated me. You called me a pathetic fool. You and Marcus, you laughed as I walked out that door." He paused, letting the memory hang in the air between them. "You went off to live a life of luxury, a life you believed you deserved. But here's the funny part. That life you were living, it was a lie. Clara and Eleanor exchanged a confused glance. Marcus's business, Sterling Enterprises, Liam continued, was a house of cards. It was built on debt, massive, crushing debt. He looked directly at Clara. Do you know who he owed all that money to? A private equity firm called Vanguard Capital Partners. The name meant nothing to them. And do you know who owns Vanguard Capital Partners? Liam asked, a slow, cruel smile spreading across his face. I do. The realization dawned on their faces with the speed of a tidal wave, moving from confusion to disbelief to pure, unadulterated horror. Clara's jaw fell open. Eleanor stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth. No, Clara whispered. That's not possible. You're a carpenter. I am, Liam said. I am also the sole heir to the $91 billion Dubois fortune. The man you threw away for a richer life was ironically one of the richest men in the world. You just never bothered to look past the sawdust to see it. He let that sink in, twisting the knife. Every dollar Marcus spent on you, the house, the cars, the parties, the champagne you drank while you laughed about me. It was all my money. You were living on a loan from the man you despised. Clara began to tremble, her carefully constructed composure shattering like glass. You did this. You ruined us. No, Liam corrected her calmly. I did not ruin you. I simply called in my loan. Marcus ruined you the moment he built his life on fraud. You ruined yourself the moment you decided that a man's worth was measured by his bank account. He then turned his gaze to Eleanor, and his eyes were chips of ice. And you encouraged her. You scorned me for years because I wasn't wealthy enough, wasn't prestigious enough for your daughter. And those $500 checks I sent you every month? The ones you took while you mocked me behind my back? He shook his head in mock pity. That was a test of my character, put in place by the woman who left me this fortune. A test I passed. Every check I sent was another confirmation that I was worthy of what I was given, and every time you cashed it, you were sealing your own fate. Eleanor let out a choked sob and sank to her knees on the concrete floor of the garage. The full weight of her folly, the sheer scale of what her arrogance had cost them, crashed down upon her. Clara, however, reacted with rage. Her horror curdled into a wild, desperate fury. "You monster!" she shrieked, her voice raw. "You let us believe. You watched us fall. You could have helped us." "Help you?" Liam's voice was sharp now, cracking like a whip. "You spent 10 years treating me like I was something you scraped off your shoe. You never loved me. You tolerated me. You used my stability until someone with a shinier wallet came along. You don't deserve help. You deserve consequences." He walked back to his workbench and picked up the piece of walnut he had been working on. He ran his hand over its smooth, perfect surface. "This is real," he said softly. "This wood, the work of my hands, this is what has always been true. The money, the power, that's just a tool. And I've used it to demolish a structure that was rotten to the core." He looked at them one last time, two broken women amidst the sawdust and the scent of cedar. They were pathetic, stripped of all their pride and arrogance, reduced to begging from the man they had thrown away. "Get off my property," he said, his voice final. "You have lost everything because you valued nothing. Now you have nothing, and you will get nothing from me." He turned his back on them and switched on the planer. The loud roar of the machine filled the garage, drowning out the sound of Clara's hysterical sobs and Eleanor's broken wails. He focused on the wood, on the clean, straight lines, and did not look back as they stumbled away, their world in ashes around them. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Marcus Sterling was arrested and charged with multiple counts of bank fraud and embezzlement. Faced with a mountain of evidence compiled by Liam's legal team, he pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. His name was a permanent stain in the financial world. Clara was left with absolutely nothing. Her name was synonymous with scandal and social ruin. She was forced to take a job as a retail assistant in a department store. The bitter irony of selling luxury goods, she could no longer afford a daily torment. Her beauty, once her greatest asset, began to fade under the strain of exhaustion and despair. Eleanor was perhaps the most broken of all. She lost her home and had to move into a small, state-subsidized apartment for seniors. The woman who had prized status and appearance above all else was now invisible, just another elderly woman living on a meager pension. The weight of her misjudgment, of steering her daughter toward a glittering mirage and away from a hidden ocean of wealth, was a burden she would carry for the rest of her days. Liam, however, flourished, but not in the way Clara or her mother would have ever understood. He didn't buy a fleet of sports cars or a gaudy mansion. He continued to live in his modest house and work in his workshop. The money for him was not the prize, it was a responsibility. With Arthur Gable's guidance, he established the Evelyn Foster Foundation, a charitable organization dedicated to funding vocational training and apprenticeships for young people in the skilled trades. He poured billions into creating state-of-the-art workshops and schools that taught carpentry, masonry, plumbing, and other crafts he knew to be the backbone of the country. He found a deep, quiet satisfaction in his new life. He would spend his mornings in boardrooms, making decisions that affected thousands, and his afternoons in his workshop, his hands covered in the familiar comfort of sawdust. He was both the powerful benefactor and the humble craftsman, a paradox that made perfect sense to him. One day, a woman came to his workshop to commission a custom-built bookshelf. Her name was Sarah. She was a local librarian with a kind smile and eyes that held a genuine warmth. She wasn't impressed by his name or the rumors of his wealth that had begun to circulate. She was impressed by the quality of his work, the passion he had for the grain of the wood. They talked for hours, first about books and wood, and then about life. He found himself opening up to her in a way he never had with Clara. With Sarah, there were no pretenses, no expectations. She saw him for who he was, the man, not the bank account. Their relationship grew slowly, built on a foundation of mutual respect and genuine affection. It was a quiet, sturdy love, like the furniture he built. It was real. A year later, Liam and Sarah stood on the balcony of a new community center his foundation had built. It was a beautiful building, filled with the sounds of young people learning, creating, and building their futures. Sarah squeezed his hand. "You've done so much good, Liam." He looked out at the city, the setting sun casting a golden glow over everything. He thought of Clara and Eleanor wherever they were, trapped in the wreckage of their choices. He felt no hatred for them anymore, only a distant, clinical pity. They had been chasing a fantasy while he had been building a reality. True wealth, he had come to understand, was not measured in dollars or stock portfolios. It was measured in the strength of your character, the honesty of your work, and the love you shared with people who saw your true worth. He had been a wealthy man long before he inherited a single dollar. It just took losing everything to finally realize it.